So this is Feast, Stay Home Feast. And what they've asked me to do is, because it coincides with International Dawn Chorus Day, and what I would have been doing this morning if it hadn't been for lockdown, I would have been leading a guided walk around the cemetery, in which I would have been focusing mostly on listening to birds rather than looking for them. A couple of reasons for that. Firstly, it was scheduled for 5 a.m., which is when the dawn chorus is really kicking off quite big time. And we've just got to the time of year where there's an enormous amount of foliage on the trees. So it's actually much more difficult to see the birds. About 6 weeks ago, you would have seen quite a lot of bare branches, and so you'd have a chance of getting your eyes or binoculars or whatever onto some birds. So instead of that, we've got this Stay Home Feast Birdsong little 40-minute thing to coincide with International Dawn Chorus Day. I've been up since 4 o'clock, so if I fall asleep halfway through, then I do apologise. It was noisy out there this morning. I went up to Streatham Common Woods because, of course, the cemetery is locked early in the morning. And there were a lot of birds, and they were all going at it hammer and tongs with the singing. So that was great. And I think another reason that they have that Feast have decided to put this thing on today is because I'm sure most people will be aware that there's been a lot of people noticing nature in general during lockdown more than they might usually do. And in particular, with much less traffic around, I think a lot of people have commented saying, I can now hear the bird song. I can hear the bird singing, and it's wonderful and it's great. And also, what's that bird? Can you tell me what that bird is? It went deep, and I have to go, I don't know. So I think that's certainly true, that because there's less traffic, then people are hearing more bird song. But also, lockdown happens to coincide with the really busy time of year for birds singing. So if you go through the seasons of the year, there are some birds that will sing all year round to a greater or lesser extent, but not many. The robin is one, the wren is another, and there are other birds that will be making all sorts of noises from time to time. But really, when we start to get into the new year, from February onwards, then the birds start singing more. They get into the breeding season, and they're advertising their availability as a breeding partner, and they're also claiming their territories. So those are the two main reasons why birds will be singing. And so from February onwards, especially, then there's this gradual build-up as more birds start their displays, and it gets louder and louder and more difficult to sort out what's what. Add to that the fact that we've got migrant birds coming in from Africa all the time through March and April and now in May, and I saw my first swifts of the year this morning, which was a huge, great moment. Every single year when they come end of April, beginning of May, it's a moment of huge joy and relief that they've made it back from Africa. But so you add things like that. Black caps are particularly vocal at the moment around the place, and other things like willow warbler, which we don't get so much, but chiff chaffs and all that. So you just get more and more species of birds, and it all gets more complicated, which is actually leading up to say that this is probably a really bad time of year to start thinking about learning birdsong, for the simple reason that there's so much going on. If you go out to the dawn chorus, you'll hear 15, 20 species of bird all sing at the same time. If you go out in December, you'll hear a robin. You might hear a wren in the background, and then you'll be able to fix those in your ear. And as they come, as they get busier through the year, then you'll be able to add them to your repertoire. But it's great that everybody's noticing. the bird song. And so what I thought I'd do is, and I hope I've got the technology right with this, because I had a bit of a disaster yesterday recording something, but I'm going to give some demonstrations of recordings of various birds, talk you through them, and then we'll have a Q&A session fairly briefly, or maybe not briefly. And then at the very end, I'm going to play you 6 bird song recordings as a quiz. And if you grab a pencil and paper or a phone or something, there will be a prize. There'll be one of my t-shirt. You can't see it now. The Trajectories of Birds t-shirts. Anybody, the person who's first person out of the hat with the correct answers will get one of these. Hurrah! Aren't you lucky you joined? Right. Just trying to admit people at the same time. I'm going to start. Yeah. So, some birds. What are the birds that we see? I think I'm going to start with one of the commonest ones around the place at the moment. It usually starts singing around late January, February. It's a pretty simple call. It only has 2 notes really, and some of you will have heard it and wondered what it is. It is the great tit. Little feisty looking thing, yellow and green with a black and white head and a black stripe down its front. And this is what it sounds like. Can you all hear that firstly? Thumbs up. Excellent. So it's often known as the teacher bird because it sounds like teacher, 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 teacher. And the old thing was that, oh, it sounds like a kid at the back of the class going, teacher, 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 which is pretty old fashioned because I don't know any children who call their teachers teacher. But anyway, but you'll have heard from that recording that it's not as simple as that because it went teacher, 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 teacher. It went down and then the second phrase went up. So it's easy to think, oh, it just has that one thing, those 2 notes. Okay, hold on. Difficult to hear the bird song recording. Could you all hear it properly or not? Okay, I'll try and turn it up as much as I can, but it's supposed to be foolproof, this thing. Let me just see, share. Advanced sharing options. I'm going to try it again. No. Share. Advanced. Music or computer sound only. Let's try, see if this is any better. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, so quite a few are hearing that quite well. Good. So the problem is that you can get that into your head quite nicely, and it gets quite irritating at times because it is so lacking in variation. I always call it's the status quo of bird songs. They've only got a couple of things, and it just varies it a bit. But actually, the great it varies its songs an enormous amount. So you'll have that teacher, 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 or you'll have teacher, teacher, or teacher, teacher, teacher. So you'll hear something. The old saying is that if you don't know what it is, okay, it's coming through very clearly, thank you. If you don't know what it is, it's probably a great tit because all the tit family have enormous number of variations of the sounds and they're not often that complicated. So they're not like the robins or the blackbird, which has got this mellifluous thing or the fluting thing. They're usually more like a sort of call rather than a song. So that was the great tit. I'm sure you got that one lodged in your heads. We're going to jump a little bit to the bird I like to call the tiny shouter, because it is very, very small. It's a wren, which is probably about, you don't know how big that is, but that is about how big a wren is. It's absolutely tiny with a perky little tail. I would share my screen, but I say I had a disaster yesterday with that, so I'm just going to probably break the internet if I try it. Somebody else coming in. But the wren, even though it's very, very small, has a song that is disproportionately loud. It sounds something like this. quite piercing. Here we go again. So you can hear it goes a little bit all over the place. It's lots of very fast repeated elements joined up together at great speed. And one of them is always, or very nearly always, a trill, a brrr kind of thing in the middle or near the end. Yeah. So that's the wren. It usually goes on. So the great tip is very simple: 2 notes, incessantly repeated. The wren song goes on for a few seconds usually. Sometimes it'll be compacted, but it's usually about 5 to 10 seconds long, and then there's a gap. And it has that very piercing and almost percussive quality. And it, as I say, it has these very fast elements repeated, and then onto the next, 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 and then that. But I think the main element that you're listening for with the wren is the jumping around, but it's the volume especially. And also the other tip with it is that you might want to look down, because wrens, generally speaking, I know I was out earlier, there was one on a a telephone wire, but generally speaking, they're quite low birds. You'll see them whizzing out in front of you, or they'll perch quite low down. Whereas some birds, like the song thrush, like to go to the top of a tree. You don't often hear that. Wrens generally kind of, head height or lower. That's a rule of thumb. So that's your wren. I'm going to do the next one quite quickly because I don't think it's a very interesting bird, but then that's just my bias. So it is another little brown job, and it is the dunnock, which again you will see fosking around. We have ours. We've got a lavender bush on our terrace, and ours it goes around very much on the ground there. We'll sometimes jump up onto the feeders, but mostly it's rooting around for insects and little scraps down on the floor. And this is the dunnock's not that interesting song. It's a sort of scrabbly, indeterminate jumble of notes. And it kind of sings a bit and then stops. And then there's a gap. And then there's not much shape to it. There's no tune to it. It's sort of jangly. And it's not a jangly in a pleasing way, I don't think, like a goldfinch. I'm being really mean on the dunnock. I love dunnocks, but it's not the most... He's telling me I'm wrong. It's not the most interesting song. Scrabbly, indeterminate. It's quite difficult to... somebody's saying, I love dunnocks. I'm so sorry, Florence. I'm so sorry. I do love dunnocks. I really do. But I suppose what it is, it's a difficult song to get in your head because there's no distinguishing feature. It's just a jumble of notes, then it stops. Right, on to another one. What's going to happen here is you're going to be overloaded with birdsong, and if you're completely new to it, you're going to be completely lost. And at the quiz at the end, you'll have no clue. But this is the way of things. If you're looking to take learning birdsong a bit further, then I wouldn't start from here. Partly, just go out and really enjoy listening to the sounds and just relish enjoying it rather than thinking I've got to learn them, because it's so difficult to pick it all out. But try and learn one at a time. Really immerse yourself in recordings of one species of bird, get it in your head, and then a couple of days later go on to the next, and then go back and repeat. Like all learning, it's a slow business. So here's one that you'll hear from February onwards, and they're still singing, although they generally have a bit of a gap in April. This is the song thrush. I'll play it first, and then I'll talk about it a bit. So the thing with the song thrush, I'll let him just go away in the background, is the distinguishing feature there is that he sings it twice. He sings it twice. He repeats. He repeats. He has an idea. He has an idea. And then he says it again. Says it again. Not on that occasion. Typical bird proving me wrong. There we go. If you listen for the tone as well, it's quite squawky, maybe, or quite pungent, and it does carry a long way. But there is a richness to it as well. It's one of the, obviously, it's the same family as the mistle thrush and the blackbird, which is known for its mellifluous song. So you just have that a little bit of richness in there occasionally, and some nice whistling tones as well. Lots of clicks and squawks. So I'm just going to contrast that with its cousin, the blackbird, which I think is one of the most familiar songs to a lot of people, and it's one of the most beautiful. So I'm just going to put that on as more kind of therapy. So you can hear there's a similar quality, but the blackbird's got a more mellifluous tone to it. So there's a kind of melodic elements. There's one round our way. At the end of its song, it sings the first phrase of Yankee Doodle, but so it has that very melodic and mellifluous thing, but there are also these creaks and squawks as well, aren't there? And there's always the gaps. So we'll listen a bit more. Phrase, gap. If you listen to the register as well, it's for a bird, for a small bird, it's quite slow, quite low, relatively low compared to my friend the goldcrest behind me, which is stratospheric. We'll hear that in a minute. I could listen to this all day, the blackbird, just wonderful. There's a time around sort of early-ish March, I think, when they really get going and there's not much else going on, and at dusk you'll hear blackbirds all around. It really is worth even going out in the rain for. Ooh, that was a little bit of R2-D2, isn't it? So that's the blackbird. There's interesting always to note that there you've got these phrasing shapes and then gaps, phrase then gaps. Another bird that does phrase then gap is everybody's favourite, or not everybody's favourite, the gardener's friend, is a very, very familiar garden bird, is the robin. And we'll just contrast that. Here's the robin song. So it has that very silvery, liquid sort of fluting and rippling sound. And that one kind of bubbled out away, almost out of control, didn't it? And the phrases are different each time, but with similar shapes, quite often. And he very conveniently stops so that I can commentate in between the phrases. I think one of the things that when I started learning about birdsong about 5 or 6 years ago, that I found really difficult, because I'm a classically trained musician. So I am able to, one of the things I'm good at, as it should be, is remembering tunes and remembering, you know, a sequence of notes. So I diligently learned the Robin's song from a CD, and I was out one winter evening, and I heard this bird song. I couldn't recognise it. I recorded it and I sent it to my friend Andy, who's a whiz about these things, thinking it was something exotic. And he said, "Well, that's a robin." And what I hadn't realised from listening to that recording of a single bird was that all robins, although they have a very similar timbre, their phrases change. So I was listening for something that sounded exactly like the one on the recording, but of course this robin sang a different tune. So I find it helpful since then to think of, imagine a friend's voice that you know very well and that you would recognise the moment they started speaking, whatever they were saying, whether they were reading the Bible or the phone book. You would go, "Ah, that's Phil, that's Sandra, that's Jim. I know who that is," which is I found that very useful. I don't know if anybody else would. So we've got to crack on. Oh, we got next, scrolling down, we've done the wren. Darn it, we don't want that again. Song thrush, whistle thrush, not so much. Chaffinch, yes, chaffinch. Chaffinches started singing around April, and they have a very distinctive shape. And if you're a cricket fan, you'll recognise this. It's an old folk description, which is that it's like a bowler coming to the crease and releasing the ball. So if you're not a cricket fan, that means nothing to you, but long gap. And it's got the finches have that kind of chirrupy quality to them. We'll hear goldfinch and greenfinch in a minute. But it's that descending acceleration and then a flourish at the end. They're very distinctive. There's a couple of them going on at Norwood Grove. They're singing a lot at the moment. So we've heard enough of the chaffinch. That's very good. The trouble is, of course, that all of these birds have other sounds that they make. So we might memorize a song and go, okay, that's great because it's got a shape to it. And then you're walking around the place and something goes beep, and you go, well, I haven't learned that yet. And then another bird goes beep, which is very slightly different. Oh, boop. And those are the things that tend to confuse. I'm just going to play one of the chaffinch's other sounds because it's quite a good one to know. So it's a sort of alarm call. Ping, 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 ping. The trouble is, it's quite similar to one of the sounds that the great tit makes. So you can easily go, oh, hold on, which one's that? They do it to confuse us, I think. So that's the chaffinch. While I've got finches, I might as well stick with one of my favourite. We've had a lot of these in our area quite recently over the winter, and they come to the feeder and they stand on the feeder and they chat and they chat and they chat for ages. They don't do the kind of going from the tree to the feeder back again and then back again. They just come down and they sit there and they natter, 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 throwing the food on the floor as they do so. Some of you will already know I'm talking about the goldfinch. So there's quite a few elements to the goldfinch. It's quite continuous. It chatters on. It's got a tinkling thing, and it's got a brrr, and it doesn't draw breath once it gets going. There's another 4 minutes of this. I'm going to cut him off in his prime. They hang around. We've had them around our place, sort of 4 of them through the winter, coming most days to the feeders, and they're always very, cheering sight. Some people think that their song is kind of inane and annoying. I happen to rather like it, so that's good. And have I got the? No, let's not do that for the moment. Right, on to, I think yes, let's do my friend the goldcrest. So the goldcrest is Europe's smallest bird, along with its cousin the firecrest. It is tidgy. It's about a quarter of an inch smaller than the wren. You can see its lovely dark eyes there, and maybe the gold on the crest, if I could find. No, it's not about. And it has, because it's so tiny, unlike the wren, which has a very pungent kind of punchy sound, the goldcrest has more of a thin piping thing, and it's very high. It's entirely possible, I'm afraid to say, and as I get older I'm more aware of this, that as you get older your hearing range just comes down. You stop being able to hear the higher frequencies, and at some point in your life you will stop being able to hear the goldcrest, and which is a sad thing. Here it is. So it has. Can you all hear that, by the way? Because it's very high and very thin. No, it's quite difficult here. So what it has, I describe it as. So it has those three notes that it repeats a few times, kind of increasing in intensity, and then a little flourish at the end. So that is the goldcrest. We have them in our next door. There's a big conifer next door to us. Somebody's just said that they can't. Alison, not sure I've actually seen a goldcrest. They're quite difficult to see. They are in the cemetery. If you walk around the cemetery and keep your ear out for that, then you will. Sometimes they will come out to the front. Look in conifer trees, low conifers or high conifers. I spent about a quarter of an hour the other day trying to trying to find a goldcrest in a tree. I could hear it. It was up in the branches. I couldn't see it. But sometimes they pop out, and that's all I can say. They're tricky. If you have binoculars, it's a little bit easier, but also they move around a lot. So we're running out of time. I'm going to do a couple more. We don't need to do that. Just very quickly, here's a chiff-chaff, which comes to the country in March and stays through the summer. Some of them over winter, actually, but a lot of them migrate from Africa. Here's the chiff-chaff, a very easy one, really, because it says it sings its name. Some people, I think, have difficulty with that, and because it's two notes, with that and the great tit. The great tit, the easier way of remembering, I think, is the quality is different, but also chiff chaff is always, the two notes are separate. Chiff chaff, chiff chaff, chiff chaff. There's always a gap between them. The great tit, the two syllables are nearly always joined. Dee cha, or dee cha, chiff chaff separate. Dee cha, the great tit joined together. My friend, I don't know if you know the writer Melissa Harrison, who used to live around here, actually, in Streatham. She describes the Chiff Chaff song as toddler with a glockenspiel, which I think is kind of mindless bang, 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 bang. And the progression goes that from in March, when I first hear it, I go, yes, Chiff Chaff. Around this time of year, the novelty begins to wear off, I have to say. And I think we'll do you've had a load, I've thrown a load at you. Are there any here that would be good? Greenfinch. Let's do very, very quickly a greenfinch, similar in some ways to the goldfinch, which is a bit worrying, so difficult to sort out. That's a diagnostic greenfinch sound, and the chattering is a little bit more under its breath. So that's the greenfinch. It's not quite so out there as the goldfinch, isn't it? The goldfinch is much more kind of, whereas the greenfinch is a little bit more. So, and finally, one bird that I have to put in because they are very common, and it is, we've got a pair in our garden. It's the wood pigeon, not to be confused with the feral pigeon that we see all around the place as peregrine fodder. It's the wood pigeon, and this is what this sounds like. So it's got that lilting rhythm. But
don't be paranoid about it.
Well, some groups of Michelle Holmes. She told me of the time she spent hosting an online lesbian chat room where the women come.
I don't know what that was. Somebody unmuted themselves, I think. So, don't put me off my stride. So, we've got a couple of questions which I'm going to take now. We have, isn't there a lyric to remember the wood pigeon cooing? Yes, there's several. There's take 2 cows, Taffy, or my toe bleeds, Betty, or all sorts of things. Yes, two coos, Betty. Somebody's already done it. Thank you. Are there any birds of prey around West Norwood? Yes, there are. There are sparrowhawks which go around the place. Somebody's answered, but of course there are the famous peregrines nesting on the church, who have been celebrities for the last couple of years. They are, I think, they're on eggs at the moment. They were certainly seen mating about a month ago, and I've seen the male a little bit around the place, but the female hasn't been. I've not seen recently. So with any luck, they'll be rearing another little brood. What are those goldfinches talking about? I have no idea. I noticed robin song changes month by month. This is a very good point. Robin song changes month by month. In January, very strident, now very melodic. Yes, they have a spring song and an autumn song, and the autumn song is supposed to be a rather more melancholy. And maybe in January they're kind of being more assertive, trying to establish their territories. Jays, I love jays. Yes, they're around a lot at the moment, up in the woods, and I saw up on the estate by the top there. What I'm going to do, before I forget, is put my email address in the comments. And I'm going to start this very quick quiz. We've got 3 minutes. I better whiz through it. So, are you ready? Pens or notes to the fore. They're going to should be 6 birds. Here's the first one. What bird is this? Okay, that's bird number 1. Bird number 2. What bird is this? Okay. Bird number 3. What bird is this? I think you'll all get that one. I hope you will, if you've been listening. Bird number 4. What bird is this? If I can find it. Here we are. You'll all get that one. Well, you might not. Who knows? Bird number 5. What bird is this? And finally, bird number 6. What bird is this?
Wearing that sort of verification before they let you join, because these are places for real
Thanks
people.
all. I'm going to have to stop him there because I can see it's got about 10 seconds left. Thank you all so much. I hope you look like you've been very attentive. I hope you've enjoyed